And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. We have quite a podcast for you guys this week, so thank you very much for tuning in. If you are indeed listening, which of course you would be, because otherwise you wouldn't be hearing me. Anyway, thank you guys so much. So let's get right to it with the news items that dropped last week after the podcast went up. Because as always, there's always a lot of news items that come out. I am recording this just a little bit earlier than I usually do. It is my mother's birthday this weekend, so I want to record this podcast a little early, edit it as soon as possible, and get it out so I can celebrate just a little bit earlier. So if you're seeing this a little earlier, it's because of that. So let's get right to it. News items that came out last week after the podcast went up. Stan Lee has shot his next 4 appearances, cameos, that's what you want to call them, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they were all directed by James Gunn. Now, Stan Lee is, of course, comic book royalty to many, and his cameos in the Marvel films are always, very, very fun and funny and everything else in between. And he's also 93 years old, so getting a bit morbid, he's not going to be around forever. So it looks like Marvel bought him in for a day, and this is all according to Doctor Strange director, which we'll talk about a little bit later on the podcast, Scott Deckerson, who did an interview with Entertainment Weekly, and he said basically they bought in Stan Lee for a day and directed 4 different cameos, and they were all directed by James Gunn, which was pretty cool. And everyone loves James Gunn, and everyone loves Stan Lee, so it makes sense. And it makes sense because, again, he is, bringing him in. All these films kind of shoot at different times, and sometimes they shoot like months in between. And Stan Lee's still pretty mobile. He's 93 years old, but you people from stories that I've read, when people see him at these Comic-Con conventions or anywhere else, he's up and he's lively and everything. So but it wouldn't make sense just like bring him in to film all these cameos, because again, he's not getting any younger, to get a little bit morbid. But at the same time, it's like, if you got the opportunity to have Stan Lee on set for a whole day, you take advantage of having Stan Lee on set for a whole day. So, and Stan Lee does have a cameo in Doctor Strange, by the way. Just putting that out there. And I have seen Doctor Strange, so that's why I mentioned we'll talk about it a little bit later. I'll do a little mini review of Doctor Strange, which was very good, by the way. But again, we'll get to that in a little bit. The next news item that came out last week, or over the weekend, actually, this one came out over the weekend. Tom Cruise's led biblical tale Methuselah finds a director. Now, Tom Cruise is, of course, always keeping himself busy. And next year, he'll have, I think he has 2 movies. Yeah, he has 2 movies, and he's filming one. So next year, he'll have the true story-based dramatic thriller American Made. That will be directed by his Edge of Tomorrow director, Doug Liman, which, of course, they're doing a sequel to that. And he will also have the Mummy reboots that will start the Universal Pictures Shared Monsters universe that comes out next year as well. He's also going to be filming Mission Impossible 6 with Mission Impossible Rogue Nation director Christopher McQuarrie back to direct. But this project, Methuselah, has been set up at Warner Brothers for apparently a while now, and Cruise hasn't actually officially signed on. He's only attached to star from far away. It's one of those projects where he's eyeing it up, but he's not officially signed on. And for those of you guys that don't know the character of Methuselah, he was, again, from the Bible, and according to the Bible, he lived nearly 1,000 years. So it seems, at least the way the reports put it, that Tom Cruise will be playing the character of Methuselah. And they found a director, and the director is Roheim Ronan. He is the director of the film, the co-director of the film Kon-Tiki, which was nominated for an Oscar with Espen Sandberg. And the duo has quickly become pretty much one of the go-to duo teams in Hollywood. There's been a lot of short lists coming out. You know how there's always short lists coming out. We talk about it here on the podcast. There's always short lists coming out, and it seems like every once in a while for a director's short list, the 2 of them are on there. And for good reason, because I've heard nothing but good things about Kon-Tiki. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. And both of them are going to be directing the new Pirates of the Caribbean film, subtitled Dead Men Tell No Tales. And based on the first trailer that they showed, it seems like, it looks, anyway, visually, like it's going to be really cool and really creepy, and something that kind of goes back to the first one, which I kind of really enjoy. So right now, there's no signs that Warner Brothers has signed the both of them on. Right now, it's only Ronan who is attached. But Warner Brothers is also looking for an A-list screenwriter, the wording of the report, to rewrite the script that, or to rewrite the current script that's being written, that's been written, I can't speak today, by Zach Dean. He wrote a film called Deadfall. And the idea of getting an A-list screenwriter is that they can officially get Tom Cruise to sign on to the project and officially greenlight it, because apparently it's not greenlit. They're just talking about it, which happens sometimes in these kind of bigger studio films as well. So they don't have a green light, but they're looking for an A-list screenwriter to bring in Tom Cruise. Be like, hey, we have this person writing the script. You want to officially sign on? And Tom Cruise would be like, yeah, sure. So biblical tales, though, when it comes to biblical tale movies, they're very hit and miss in Hollywood these days. Biblical tale movies were like the prime movies back in the day. It was like westerns, biblical tales, and then just evolving. But Ben-Hur, of course, the remake of Ben-Hur was the last biblical tale film that we had, and that failed to even make back its budget, and failed to even cross $100 million at the box office. Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings wasn't met with a lot of fanfare, and that was, of course, another biblical tale movie. The only biblical tale movie in the last, let's say, 5 years, because that's the span of what I can remember, is Darren Aronofsky's Noah, which actually had Methuselah, the character Methuselah in the movie, played by Anthony Hopkins. That was a sizable hit. It had a lot of fans. I personally liked it, and again, it was a sizable hit for the studio and in the box office. So that was probably the only real biblical tale. I mean, not counting the faith-based movies, because those are just faith-based movies. They're not biblical movies. So, Risen was another one. That was a modest hit, but it wasn't a big hit like Noah and everything else. So it's a very hit and miss, and I think Warner Brothers has to be very careful. Even bringing in a star like Tom Cruise, who's a big name and everyone really knows, I think that's still a risk that a studio is taking for these biblical films. The audience isn't the same anymore. The audience. I think you have to do a lot to kind of bring in these people, the fans. I don't know why I said these people, fans, to come in and sit down for however long, probably almost a 2-hour movie in this case, to really kind of invest themselves in biblical tales, because their biblical tale movies again are very hit and miss, and there are people that just don't like the idea of biblical tale movies. So we'll see what happens with this one. This news item came out right as soon as I was editing, and right as soon as I started uploading the podcast. So apparently, they are going to reboot Rambo, and the film is called Rambo New Blood, which of course is a homage to the first Rambo film called First Blood. So the report says that the studio behind that holds the rights for the Rambo films, which is New Image Millennium Films, they're going to tackle a new franchise very similar to James Bond. That's the wording of the press release. The plan is to cast someone young so they can build a potential franchise, and the reboot will be scripted by newcomer Brooks McLaren, and already has a director in Ariel Vrolman. I think that's how you say his name. He's directed films like The Iceman. He directed Criminal that came out earlier this year with Kevin Costner, Ryan Reynolds, Gary Oldman, Tommy Lee Jones, Gal Gadot. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't good. It wasn't awesome, but it wasn't that bad. So they already have a director. They already have a writer. Right now, of course, they're searching for their new Rambo, because Sylvester Stallone will not be involved in this new franchise. So it should be interesting to see kind of where they go with Rambo New Blood, as it's being called. The original film was, of course, based off the David Morrell book, and of course spawned many sequels, but there's no word yet on whether the reboot will follow suit. There's no word if they're going to just base it off the book, or they're just going to base it off the first movie, because the movie changed some stuff from the book as well, as many book adaptations do. And who knows if they're going to change the time period? Who knows if they're going to set it in modern day? Because the first film was, of course, set during post-Vietnam era, and we'll see what happens. Rambo has a special place in a lot of people's hearts, of course. And the last film came out in 2008, which is by far features one of the most bloodiest and deadliest scenes I've ever seen in action films. When he's just mowing guys down. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But there was word even a few years ago that Sylvester Stallone was working on a new Rambo film, and that he wanted to do another one. And if I remember correctly, I think the new one would have been a passing of the torch kind of film. But obviously, that's not happening now. They're just gonna go and fully reboot it. So it should be interesting to see how people take to that new Rambo idea. But the idea of them being like, we're just gonna base it off. We're just gonna base it off, James Bond. I don't know if that's the best idea, but if it works for them, then great. We'll see what happens with that. I mean, Millennium Films and New Image, they're also behind the Expendables films, so this movie won't be that expensive, but I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. All right, this is the last news item that came out last week after the podcast went up, and this is one I was really excited about. Tom Hardy is set to play Al Capone in a new film called Fonzo. Now, Tom Hardy, of course, one of the biggest and most popular names in Hollywood right now, and every time you see him on screen, you know that he is not phoning it in. You know that he is gonna give us a great or amazing performance. So it makes sense that you would want someone that big to play Al Capone, and that is the case. Tom Hardy has joined Josh Trank's newest film, which he also will write the film, titled Fonzo, which will follow the last days of Al Capone's life. And this is the official synopsis they released when they released the news, saying the ruthless businessman and bootlegger who ruled Chicago with an iron fist before being famously taken down by Elliot Ness. After nearly a decade of imprisonment, dementia rots his mind and his past becomes present as harrowing memories of his violent and brutal origins melt into his waking life. And this is pretty cool, because Tom Hardy was actually supposed to play Al Capone years ago. There was a film titled Cicero, which is the town where I'm from, years back, and the project never got off the ground, and that was even before Tom Hardy became a household name that he is now. And now, of course, Hardy is one of the most recognizable stars in Hollywood. So tackling someone like Al Capone makes sense. And it's not the first time that Hardy has played a criminal, even a gangster. He played Bronson in the film Bronson, and he played the Cray brothers earlier. I think it was earlier this year. No, it was last year in the film Legend. Now, the Cray brothers were, I don't want to ruin or even make the assumption, but the way that some of the trailers and some of the stories that I've read about the Cray brothers, because I didn't know anything about the Cray brothers. They were twins. That's all I knew. And Tom Hardy played both of them. They were kind of like the Al Capone of London. But I don't want to go that far out. That's kind of like what I was reading about them. That's kind of what the assumption was. But yeah, Tom Hardy is going to play Al Capone, which is really cool. But the wild card here is Josh Trank. Now, if the name doesn't sound familiar to you because you haven't heard his name in a very long time, Josh Trank was a director of Fantastic Four and the director of Chronicle. And we haven't heard anything about Josh Trank after Fantastic Four came out. So depending on what side of the drama you believe, whether you believe Fox's stories or whether you believe Trank's stories, Trank may or may not have been to blame for the failure of Fantastic Four. Either way, it should be interesting to see Trank jump back from that and to this, considering that his name carries some weight now. Not the good kind, of course, because it's connected to Fantastic Four, but we'll see what happens. But again, having Tom Hardy, having him play Al Capone, having a movie based like that, and the movie sounds interesting. The synopsis is pretty cool. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if Josh Trank. This is a much smaller movie, so I think maybe this will help Trank get back in the right footing. We'll see what happens with that. So at the moment, Fonzo doesn't have a release date or filming date, but I'm sure we'll hear something sooner rather than later about that. All right, so let's get to this week's news items. And the first news item for this week was the long-awaited adaptation of Stephen King's The Dark Tower will finally hit the big screen, but it looks like fans will have to wait a little longer. The Dark Tower will be directed by Nicolae Arcel and has a lead in Idris Elba, and was set to come out early next year on February 17th. However, it looks like Sony Pictures will do the right thing, by the right thing I'll get to that in a minute, and will move the film to a more appropriate release date in the summer. And according to Entertainment Weekly, Sony has pushed the film's release date to July 28th. As to why, Entertainment Weekly released a statement saying principal photography for Nicolae Arcel's directed film wrapped on schedule in late July, but the plan to have a completed film ready to screen 6 months later proved to be overly ambitious. Now Sony Pictures and production company MCR have decided post-production can't be finished in that time frame and are about to inform the theater owners of that change. So yeah, they at first it looked like they were going to release the movie in January, and they're like, no, we're going to push it back to February, giving the film an extra month. And everyone was like, really, you're gonna finish filming in July, which is what they did, and you're gonna release the movie in February. So you're only giving, again, that kind of 6 kind of months of filming, of post-production. That's not enough time for a potentially very heavy visual effects movie to finish their visual effects, make them look good for a film that everyone has been waiting for years. Because The Dark Tower is one of those movies that, since I really started following the news cycle, is one of those movies that I have seen been reported on year after year, months after months of it's happening, oh, it's postponed, no, it's back on, it's moved to a different studio, this director's attached. Ron Howard was attached for a long time, and then he finally dropped down. I think now he's just producing it. So this is a movie that people have been looking for, and I've been looking forward to it for a while too, because it's a very interesting property, and it's one of those properties that I think would be interesting to see on the big screen. So many people were again intrigued and confused that really going to release it in February. The Dark Tower really feels like a summer movie, and thankfully they have moved it to the summer, and they've given it a July 28th spot, which is really, really cool. Dark Tower is a movie that lends itself to be a summer film, and I'm just glad that we're finally just going to see it. Even if you have to wait a little longer, I'm okay with that, as long as it's good. I don't care. So The Dark Tower is led by Idris Elba, and it also has a cast of Matthew McConaughey, Jackie Earle Haley, Ivy Lee, Fran Franz, and Catherine Winnick. And again, will open now on July 28th of next year. The Raid director Gareth Evans will direct a film called Apostle. Now, Gareth Evans, made a name for himself by directing 2 of the biggest, brutal, best action films in, I'd say, the last 10 years in The Raid and The Raid 2. Now, he's done some other films, like the martial arts film Waratu. He just had a film called Hedgehog come out, or is coming out. I saw it at a film festival. I don't know if it's coming out. I know it's coming out here in the States next year, but I saw it at a film festival, so I saw it early. And he also did a segment in VHS2, the horror anthology film called Safe Haven. And he also did a short about a samurai called Previs Action, which you can see online. I'll put a link to it if you want to watch it. It's actually really good. But now it looks like he's going to direct and write a film called Apostle. Now, The Hollywood Reporter has details on the film, saying the film is about a mysterious man who travels to a remote island in search for his missing sister. When he attempts to rescue his sister by a religious cult, which is demanding a ransom for a return, it soon becomes clear that the cult will regret the day it baited this man who digs deeper and deeper into the secrets and lies upon which the commune was built on. The plan is to start filming in March next year in the UK, which is a change for Evans because he usually shoots in Indonesia. There was also no word on in that initial report what genre would be. There's still no report on what the genre will be, although a report later came out saying that Dan Stevens is in negotiations to join, and they labeled the film as a period revenge film. So that kind of gives us a little bit of an idea of what's going on. Now, the addition of Stevens is really cool because Stevens is one of those actors that not a lot of people know yet, but people that do know him just are absolutely floored by this guy. I am. He was in Downton Abbey, I think season 1 or something like that, and then he left. and he was in 90 Museum 2 where he played, I think he played Lancelot. And it kind of showed his, humorous side. But he had done other stuff, more kind of dark, twisted stuff, like A Walk in the Tombstones. He had a small role in that. But I think everyone who is a fan of Dan Stevens now knows him for his role in The Guest. And The Guest, if he taps into that kind of dark character, it kind of sounds like it, the day they regret baiting this man from the synopsis. Then if he can tap into that darkness that he had in The Guest, I think it'd be really, really cool. Dan Stevens is one of those guys that I think that people will get to know very soon. He'll have a broader audience because he's actually going to play the Beast in the Beauty and the Beast film, the live-action adaptation of Disney's Beauty and the Beast that comes out next year. And he's also going to be in the FX superhero drama show Legion that comes out next year. He also has a monster film called Colossus, which may or may not come out next year. There's no release date for that just yet. But it sounds really cool. I mean, Gareth Evans is one of those directors that I'll watch anything he does because of the raids, because of the raid movies, and Headshot, and Murantu, and the samurai short film that he did for YouTube. He's just one of those directors that everyone kind of knows him for his action stuff, but he did the VHS segment in the horror genre, and now we know this movie's going to be a period revenge film. So I don't know. I think this sounds pretty cool. You got Dan Stevens in there. Who knows if his usual cast from the raid movies or from Headshot and whatever will appear in the film. Even if they don't, maybe they'll do like the stunt work behind the scenes. So I'm really looking forward to it. I really am. So this is kind of me geeking out over this. So there's no release date yet for Apostle, but I'm obviously going to keep my eye on this and see what happens with the project. All right, so let's move on. Tim Miller will produce the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. That's right. Tim Miller is doing pretty well for himself after dropping out of Deadpool 2, despite the news still being sour, for a lot of fans. Miller has already found 2 projects since then. One of them is for the same studio, Fox, because again, the split was mutual. It was a mutual split. There was no hatred for that. He's doing an adaptation of Daniel Suarez's best-selling novel Influx, which is a cyber thriller. And now he has a second project in Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, the Hollywood Reporter reports that Miller will be a producer on the film. He's not directing the film, he's only producing the film, because the film already has a director in Jeff Flower, who actually has worked with Miller in the past on a short film, on a short animated film of all things, too, called Rockfish. So the two have worked together in the past, and now they're going to work together on this. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog, of course, one of the most popular video game characters out there. So it seems like Sonic the Hedgehog is he's in pretty good hands. Now, the film is going to be a CGI live-action hybrid film, and it'll actually be the directing debut for Jeff Flower, as he's worked a lot behind the scenes on visual effects kind of stuff. So it should be interesting to see kind of where this goes. There's no word yet on when the film will go into production, but you got Tim Miller attached to Sonic the Hedgehog. You know it's not going to be cheesy. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that. We talked about Rambo earlier. This is a weird segue. Well, it's not really a segue because we just talked about Sonic the Hedgehog. But we talked about Rambo earlier, and of course Sylvester Stallone. But it seems like Sylvester Stallone, he's not too bitter because he's got some work coming. Sylvester Stallone is going to return for a sequel to Escape Plan. Back in 2013, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger starred in an action thriller called Escape Plan, which has Stallone playing a man that essentially goes to prison to break out because he wants to test the security flaws. And he's put into the ultimate test when he's put in a prison called the Tomb, which is one of the most inescapable prisons in the world, where he teams up with an inmate played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. The film was okay. I mean, it wasn't bad. It felt like a real callback to like 90s action thriller movies. That's really what it was. So now reports are saying that the sequel to Escape Plan is in the works, and so Sylvester Stallone is going to be a supporting role instead of a lead role this time around. Now, there's no word yet on the plot other than that, but we can assume that Stallone will probably get stuck in a prison somewhere, or has to break in or break out or whatever. Right now, the only other person returning is Mike Kaplan, who wrote the script for the first film. So again, the first film wasn't that bad. Again, it felt like a callback to the '90s action thriller films, and Stallone and Schwarzenegger, were pretty cool on screen. Schwarzenegger actually had like a really standout sequence where he was talking in his native tongue. It was, I don't know, that scene would, for whatever reason, really sticks out to me because it showed that Schwarzenegger could do more than just do quippy one-liners. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. It's one of those movies where you can just pop in and be like, just have some fun with it, So yeah, there's filming is expected to begin in March, although there's no release date set just yet. So Escape Plan 2 is on the way. Disney is in talks with the Girl on the Train writer for the live-action adaptation of Snow White. Disney, of course, continues to do their live-action adaptations of their classic animated films, and now Snow White is the next one to come into the assembly line. The film will be like Disney's other live-action adaptation, Beauty and the Beast, as it will be a musical. Now, the film doesn't have a director just yet, but Disney is currently in talks with Aaron Crescendo Wilson, I think that's how you say her middle name, who wrote the Girl on the Train adaptation earlier this year. Snow White is set to expand on the story of from the original 1937 film, which, in case you forgot, was actually the Walt Disney's first animated feature film. So Snow White has has a legacy attached to it, and it's one of those films I'm sure Disney will pay very close attention to and not try to mess it up, since it is one of the first, if not the first, animated film that was a huge hit for the studio, and has led to all these other Disney animated films like Beauty and the Beast and Lion King and all the other princess movies. So the film is still in the early stages. Again, it's barely just getting a writer, so it's going to be a while before we even hear anything about the project. So we'll see what happens with that. But it joins the long list of movies that are getting the live action treatment for Disney. The Predator is in negotiations with Olivia Munn and has already revealed its surprise setting, of all things. So 20th Century Fox and Shane Black, the director, is gearing up to start production on the new Predator film called The Predator, and the film already has a star in Boyd Holbrook, who of course again replaced Benicio del Toro when he couldn't officially sign on. Now the Hollywood Reporter reports that Olivia Munn is in negotiations to star in the film. Munn will if she officially joins the cast, will play a scientist opposite Boyd Holbrook's Special Forces Commando. No word yet on what kind of scientist she will be, but the big thing is the setting. This is the big thing about this story, the setting. The Predator is going to be set in the suburbs. Yes, the Predator will be going through suburbia, and if that's not a Shane Black twist for you, then I don't know what is, because that screams Shane Black in every sense of the word. Now the idea is odd, and when I read it, I was like, "What the hell? What the hell are they doing?" Because you imagine the Predator being set in the jungle, which is where the first film was based. Even Predators, the Adrian Brody one, that was set in the jungle. That was actually set in a planet that had a jungle, and of course, Predator 2 was based in New York, and then everyone tries to ignore Aliens vs Predator for good reason. The suburb idea does sound odd, but I don't know, it's kind of interesting because it is Shane Black, so you kind of forgive it a little bit because it just sounds odd, but it sounds like something Shane Black would do. And the film is co-written, by the way, by Fred Dekker, who of course wrote Monster Squad, which, if you don't remember what Monster Squad was, or if you've never seen it, I highly recommend you, because I saw Monster Squad for the first time this year. For the first time this year, I saw Monster Squad, and it was one of those movies that I had never seen before. I heard so much about it, and I finally saw it, and I can see why people loved it so much. It deals with these kids fighting off monsters like the Wolfman and Dracula and the Mummy in their small town. So it sounds like Deckard and Shane Black, which is like, they kind of threw it around, like, should we just put the Predator in the suburbs and see what it does? And like, yeah, let's do that. So that's exactly what they did. So the idea sounds odd, but interesting when you look at it in the broader spectrum that it is a Shane Black and Fred Dekker movie. I'm not gonna knock the idea. I mean, I'm knocking it a little bit because it sounds so ridiculous and out there, but I'm not gonna knock it completely. So let's see what happens first in that respect. And when it comes to Olivia Munn, I mean, she's kind of proven herself. I mean, everyone just kind of looks at Munn, she's like, oh, she can't act, which that was one of my criticisms too. But when she's given the right material, and she's pretty much proven herself that she can act. If you haven't seen The Newsroom, which was a show on, I think it was HBO, she was fantastic in that. And that was kind of the first sign where it was like, oh wow, she can act. So given the good material, Olivia Munn can knock it out of the park. So it's interesting that they'll go with Olivia Munn. I'm still disappointed that Benicio del Toro was not in The Predator, but again, if they put a good cast together, I'm sure it will all be good. Sony Pictures is eyeing Fede Alvarez for the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo sequel. Now, Sony Pictures has been toying with the idea of doing a sequel to the American adaptation of the acclaimed novel Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Of course, the original film came out, actually the American version, because there was an original version that came out in Sweden first. The American version came out in 2011 and was directed by David Fincher and had a cast of Rooney Mara and Daniel Craig. And the sequel, which would have been called The Girl Who Played with Fire, which is actually based off the second book in the series, never happened. Sony Pictures and David Fincher couldn't get on the same page. There was budget issues. There was, I think there was creative issues as well, besides budget issues. So the years went by, and even Mara and Craig were like, is this ever going to happen? And David Fincher had dropped out way before that. So Sony then released word that they were going to do another Girl with a Dragon Tattoo film. I think it was earlier this year, maybe late last year, called The Girl in the Spider's Web, which is actually based off a new novel written by David Langerkrantz, who took over the novel series after the death of the original creator and writer Stieg Larsson. Now, The Girl with the Spider's Web already has a script being written by Stephen Knight, who has written a lot of Steven Soderbergh films, and will follow Salander, the main character, Elizabeth Salander, which is a hacker, through another investigation, teaming up with Michael Blomquist, who is the character that Daniel Craig played, when they uncover a web of government spies and cyber criminals with deadly stakes attached. Now, Sony Pictures has been just pushing this, and they really want this to happen, and now it looks like they really want it to happen because they're eyeing up Don't Breathe director and the Evil Dead remake director Fede Alvarez to take the director's chair. Now, Alvarez is still pretty much a fresh name, and he's a new name in Hollywood, but his last two films have done extremely well. Don't Breathe was a massive success. It was made for cheap, and it made back its budget like day one, and it's just been everything else has been just profits. The Evil Dead remake, which I don't know if a lot of people gave a chance, it's actually very good. Also was very moderately successful because it was made for cheap as well, and it made its budget back that opening weekend as well. So they really want Fede Alvarez, who, if you're going to remake another movie and try to build a new franchise, Fede Alvarez is the name to do, as a name to bring in. Now, Alvarez's last film, here's another interesting tidbit, were both under the Sony Pictures umbrella. So he has made a lot of money for Sony Pictures, and it just makes sense that they would want him to come back and make them a lot more money. Because The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, even though it's been away from the public for a while, they probably see that name again and they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I would want to go watch another one of those. Now, Alvarez is currently developing an adaptation of a comic book series called Incognito for Sony Pictures. So it should be interesting to see, where if he signs on for the girl with Dragon Tattoo, or I'm sorry, the girl in the Spider's Web. It should be interesting to see, what project. I'm assuming if he officially signs on, the girl in the Spider's Web will take the lead on that and will take up his time. But I don't know. It should be interesting. Now, Fede Alvarez is one of those directors that I am fully behind because he's done just 2 for 2 so far. But it should be interesting to see kind of where Sony Pictures takes this, because obviously Sony Pictures is not doing the original sequel books, The Girl Who Played with Fire and The Girl Who Kicked a Hornet's Nest. which I guess is fine. I mean, it from the quick synopsis that I read, it sounds like this new novel is it's more of a contemporary story, and you don't want to go back in time a little bit, I guess. But I don't know. It should be interesting to see kind of where this goes. Again, Fede Alvarez is a great director, and it should be interesting to see kind of where Sony Pictures is like, you know what? No, we're gonna move forward with this. So we'll see. The American version was okay. I mean, it wasn't awesome. I think Rooney Mara did an excellent job as Elizabeth Salander, and I thought the Swedish version was actually a little closer to the book. The American version kind of took its liberties with the book, but that's bound to happen. But Rooney Mara was fantastic in that film, and David Fincher did an amazing job directing it. So I don't know. The American. I mean, I saw the Swedish version. I saw the original version first, so I kind of have a little bit more, love for that one because it was so well done and it was so good than the American one. But I mean, both of them stand on their own accord and their own merits, and they're both very good in their own right. So we'll see what happens with this new one. Speaking of things coming back from the dead, Starship Troopers reboot is in the works once again. The Hollywood Reporter reports that Columbia Pictures is rebooting the cult classic and beloved 1997 film Starship Troopers. They also have 2 writers already attached to pen the script, in Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, who have reboots on their resumes as they worked on the reboot for Friday the 13th and next year's Baywatch film. The original was, of course, directed by Paul Verhoeven. It was loosely based on Robert A. Heinlein's, I think that's how you say his name, Hugo award-winning novel of the same name that centers on a propaganda-filled futuristic society where an Earth is in an intergalactic war with bug-like alien species. Now, this is the first time, and I mentioned again when I brought this up, because this is the first time that the Starship Troopers reboot has been in the news. Back in 2011, the producer of the Fast and the Furious franchise, Neil H. Moritz, was eyeing up the project with Toby Jaffe, who both of them actually produced another remake / reboot of a Paul Verhoeven film, Total Recall, and we all know how that turned out. So I don't know. I don't know if they should just stop, because Paul Verhoeven films are very his movies that he did were just so good on their own. They still somewhat hold up. Just leave them alone. Just leave them alone. Anyway, the report does mention that the film does plan to go back to the original novel source material rather than reference the original film. Now, for those that don't know, the book and the film were very different, where in the novel, it advocates militarism to the point of fascism, which the author, who was an ex-Navy man himself, was never keen to refute in any sort of way possible. And Verhoeven's films took a more kind of social satirical approach. So it should be interesting, how the studio and the writers and whatever director signs on, where they kind of plan to go with all that. But I don't know. We'll see with that. There's no word on when production will start. Of course, it's still very early on. They just announced it and they have writers. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. The reason why Starship Troopers works so well is because it came out in the late 90s, but it also had that very, again, satirical approach to everything. So I don't know if and the movie still holds up. Not everything holds up very well, but it still holds up pretty well, surprisingly. So I don't know. I'm very conflicted about that, and especially them saying that they're going to go back to the source material of the novel. That should be interesting to see, because again, the novel and the film are very different. So I don't know. Well, I don't know. I have no idea what to even think about this, but I don't know. We'll see. Johnny Depp has joined the sequel to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them in a mystery role, even though Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them has not even hit theaters yet. But Warner Bros. Is already planning, of course, 4 sequels. We talked about it here on the podcast already. So they're not slowing down. They're already working on the sequel. And their first reported news on the sequel is that Johnny Depp will star in the sequel, although no details on who he is playing has been released. Now, there is word that his character that he will play will potentially appear in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them when it is released, but that isn't confirmed just yet, so let's slow down. And of course, speculation has already run rampant all over online. One report says that he'll play Grindelwald, which, if you're familiar with your Harry Potter history, is an old friend, put it that way, of Dumbledore. And in the time frame of Fantastic Beasts, which is set in the 20s, Grindelwald was actually a bit of a troublemaker, to say the least. So they're saying that he could play that, and that was kind of, and David Yates and the director of the film, David Yates, and writer J.K. Rowling have already dropped hints that the character would be a major role in the sequels to come. So he could play that. Other people are saying he could play Dumbledore, which that sounds interesting, I guess, to say the least. Other people are saying he could play someone else, but those are kind of the two big ones. One of them is Grindelwald, and the other one is Dumbledore. And of course, you don't announce someone like Johnny Depp this early to be like, oh, he's just gonna play like it's a stunt casting. He's gonna play just someone small. You don't cast someone like Johnny Depp to play someone small unless it fits a bigger purpose to the story. So the idea of him playing someone small doesn't make any sense. But him playing someone like Grindelwald or Dumbledore it does make sense. Although the idea that they've already announced this before the first film even comes out, and the story that his character could appear in some way, shape, or form in the first film, I guess that's a way to build hype because you kind of anticipate it a little bit when you go watch it now. But I don't know. I don't know about Johnny Depp joining the film because look, I don't know if I don't know if I mentioned it in the podcast. Maybe I have. Johnny Depp is one of those actors where I wish he would go back to the way he was before. I'm over the Johnny Depp playing these over-the-top, wacky characters. I'm over it. I don't care anymore. I really don't. I want him to, take on these, big, meaty roles. I want him to play someone real. I want him to play someone like Whitey Bulger in Black Mass. I want him to play someone like Dillinger in Public Enemies. I want him to play someone real. I want him to show that he still has it, that he still has those dramatic chops. Playing an over-the-top character like the Mad Hatter or Jack Sparrow, fine, that's great. But when it's every other, character that you're playing, it just doesn't work. I'm over it. I'm over him playing these wacky, over-the-top characters. I don't care anymore. Every time I see that, it just takes me out, and it just reminds me that, he knows how to be, this dramatic actor. Let him do that. So I don't know. It's the idea of him being a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them sounds like a good idea on paper, but will it actually be a good idea overall? Well, I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them 2 does have a release date for 2018 in November, so I'm pretty sure we'll find out who he's playing once the first film comes out or way after, before the sequel starts filming or during filming. The Flash loses another director in Rick Famuyiwa. Warner Bros. And DC's entertainment adaptation of The Flash has taken another major step backwards as director Rick Famuyiwa has dropped out of the film over, wait for it, creative differences. Famuyiwa joined the film back in June, to many fans' delight, but the film now has to scramble to find another director because they just dropped out. He just said, this is the second time. This is the second time. Actually, I guess you could say somewhat third time that the film has lost director. The first one was Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were the directors of the Jump Street movies and the Lego movie. They were looking at it. They didn't officially sign on. They were looking at the project. They were in talks and negotiations, and then the Young Han Solo movie came their way, and they took that. So then they hired Seth Grahame-Smith. He was going to make his directorial debut with The Flash, and he left for, yes, you guessed it, creative differences. And now Rick Famuyiwa has left as well. So this is essentially the third director, although Phil Lord and Chris Miller are two people, but this is the third director they've lost. And Rick Famuyiwa, he released a statement saying, When I was approached by Warner Bros. And DC about the possibility of directing The Flash, I was excited about the opportunity to enter this amazing world of characters that I loved growing up and still do to this day. I was also excited to work with Ezra Miller, who is a phenomenal young actor. I pitched a version of the film in line with my voice, humor, and heart. While it's disappointing that we couldn't come together creatively on a project, I remain grateful for the opportunity. I will continue to look forward to opportunities to tell stories that speak to the fresh, generational, topical, and multicultural point of view. I wish Warner Brothers, DC, John Berg, Jeff Johns, and Ezra Miller all the best as they continue the journey into the Speed Force. It's a very nice comment that he made. But The Hollywood Reporter released this saying that Famuyiwa left because sources say that the dope director's vision of making of the movie with a more edge clashed with the studio's take. Of course, we don't know what that means, but this is rather telling and a bit worrisome. You can't lose a third director and in a universe that fans are already worried about and eerie about. Batman v Superman did not deliver on the promise that a lot of fans wanted. Suicide Squad, very divisive film, but for the most part did not deliver on what fans were looking forward to. It made a lot of money, sure, but a lot of fans were like, it could have been better. So the idea that now we have this Flash movie that has now no director and is going to potentially start filming sometime next year because it has a release date of March 16th of 2018. They have to start filming next year to reach that date. It already has a cast. Ezra Miller is going to play Barry Allen, the Flash. Kiersey Clemons, who joined the film potentially to work with Rick Famuyiwa again because they worked together on Dope. She's playing Iris West. Billy Crudup will play Barry's father in the film. This is worrisome. It is, because you've already lost 3 directors. Okay, projects lose directors all the time. Sure, you lose 1 director, maybe 2. You don't lose 3 before filming's about to start. You don't. That is crazy that you lose 3 directors. It's a bit and how is it that he joined the film back in June and just now we're hearing, what happened? The Warner Bros. Like, yeah, they bought whatever he was selling at that point, and now here in November they're like, man, no, we're not buying it anymore. We don't want it anymore. Something tells me that, I don't know if there's something more going on or whatever, but it's worrisome when this happens, and I'm really disappointed because Rick Famuyiwa's what he did with Dope was really, really good. He did an amazing film with Dope. So this is a bit disappointing, but it's more worrisome because, again, this is the 3rd director they lost. It's people will probably say, oh, it's not a big deal. No, it is an extremely big deal that they've lost 3 directors already before filming has started. It's an extremely big deal. And it is a bit worrisome. Now, The Flash could end up being great if they bring in a director, and the movie could still be great. It can. Although I'm not sold on Ezra Miller playing The Flash still. But the movie could be great. But the fact that this movie already has lost 3 directors is a bit worrisome. And it is a very telling sign that every director that is left not every director, but the 2 directors previously attached with Seth Grahame-Smith and Rick Famuyiwa have leftover creative differences. That is more telling than anything. I don't know. Well, obviously I'll keep you guys updated on the Flash movie when more news comes out. Quentin Tarantino confirms again that he is retiring after his next 2 films. That the beloved famed director Quentin Tarantino surprises fans when he said he would retire after directing his 10th film, which, if you're keeping count, which means his next 2 movies will be his last. Now, that was back in 2014, around the time Django Unchained was coming out. And Tarantino has gone back to those comments at Adobe Max, which is a creative conference over in San Diego, saying, in the most Tarantino way possible, drop the mic, boom, tell everybody, match that shit. He then went on to tell the audience, hopefully the way I define success when I finish my career is that I'm considered one of the greatest filmmakers that ever lived, and going further, a great artist, not just filmmaker. Additionally, he told the crowd that before he works on his next film, he is going to work on a historical nonfiction project he's been researching for years that centers on the 1970s, although he doesn't know if it's going to be a book, a documentary, or a 5-part podcast. So when it comes to retirement, we have to kind of wait and see whether this is true or not, because you never know. Kurt Russell even joked around, again, this is around the time that Django Unchained came out, and Kurt Russell was in Django Unchained, he said, "You actually believe that?" So we have to wait and see if that is the case or not. Even if he does retire, Quentin Tarantino is a well-known movie lover, and I doubt that he would just walk away from the film industry just like that after his 10th film. I'm sure he'll probably stick around to do, like a producer role or something like that. I can imagine that he'll just walk away from film just like that out of the blue. As for films, he's teased that he wants to do another Western set in the 1930s Australia, and kind of having a Bonnie and Clyde kind of story. He's also talked about doing a film called Killer Crow, and this was around the time that Inglourious Basterds came out, which will follow another group of soldiers around that time. So right now, the only man that knows Tarantino's future is Tarantino himself. So whether he retires or not, that's gonna be completely up to him. He's been very animate, saying that he wants to quit after 10 films. So I mean, it's it's not really like up to us to be like, no, you're gonna keep filming to the day you die. I mean, it's I think Tarantino has done enough for film fans. He's given us all these films, and he's given us the Kill Bill movies. He's given us Django Unchained, Inglourious Basterds, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and others. But I mean, he's been very adamant about 10 films, I'm done. And I can see why he would just be like 10 films and done. He doesn't want to overstay his welcome, or he doesn't want to lose steam, and just he doesn't want to go off on a stinker. He doesn't want to keep making films that aren't as good as his previous films, which is fine. I'm pretty sure I've said this on the podcast. I am a fan of Tarantino's work, and the stuff he puts on screen. As a person, sometimes he irks me. Sometimes he says stuff that just doesn't go well. Not go well with me, just stuff that just bugs me. But as a filmmaker, he is his films are very good. You can tell he's a massive movie lover. His inspirations are clear on screen. So having Tarantino walk away from film as a director, it will be an impact on certain filmmakers and everything else. But I don't know. It's if he wants to walk away, I think it's a decision that we have to respect. It's something he's mentioned time and time again. So I think he's serious. I think he is serious about saying 10 films, I'm done. So we'll see if that is truly the case once he reaches his 10th film. But right now, let's try to enjoy the time that we have Quentin Tarantino with us. I mean, he's not dying, but on that sounded like he was dying. I'm not killing off Quentin Tarantino, but let's just enjoy the fact that he is still here and that he's still potentially directing films, because we got two left. So I'm sure that he's not going to go off with a whimper either. And finally, the last news item of the day, which just broke as I was recording the podcast: Game of Thrones actors Ciaran Hinds, I think I'm pronouncing his first name right, will play the Justice League villain Steppenwolf. Now, if you remember, after Batman v Superman: Dawn Justice came out, there was a deleted scene that came out that showed a mysterious figure, which was later revealed to be Steppenwolf, with 3 boxes, which were mother boxes, which were it's a very big thing in the DC comics and related to Steppenwolf and the eventual big bad that will probably show up in Justice League Part 2 in Darkseid. Now, Darkseid is Steppenwolf is the uncle of Darkseid in the comics, and Steppenwolf actually decides to come to Earth and invade, of course, Earth. Gave it away, and he's and it's very, of course, it leads to, it would potentially lead to people being like, what, we should team up and take this guy out. He's got someone else like him in Darkseid. Okay, let's team up and take him out too. So the Wrap reports that Ciaran Hinds will play Steppenwolf with mocap. With a motion capture performance. Additionally, they say that the character will look different than he did in the deleted scene. So there's that. This is pretty good. I mean, Ciaran Hinds is a very talented actor. People will probably, again, I mentioned Game of Thrones. He played Mace Rider, the leader of the Wildlings. He was also in films like Road to Perdition, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, There Will Be Blood, Munich. He's he's been in a bunch of stuff, and he's always good. It's really great to kind of to get him attached to it, even if it is through motion capture. So I assume he's just going to be voicing the character for a lot of it. I'm sure he'll have a stunt guy for his action scenes, but this is pretty cool. He's a talented actor, and he joins the long list of the cast for Justice League. So it should be interesting. And the film just wrapped up filming. I don't know if it's still filming. I know it wrapped up filming in London. So I don't know if it's just wrapped up filming in general. Either way, the film comes out next year. Justice League Part 1 opens next year on November 17th. So it should be pretty cool. I mean, Steppenwolf it isn't probably one of the most well-known villains out there. I'm sure they'll make a reference to Darkseid in Justice League, but having a big name actor like Ciaran Hinds in the film, and very talented actor at that, could be very cool and could be very interesting. So we'll see what they do with that in Justice League. All right, so that was all the news that came out at the time of this recording. So let us move on to trailer talk. We had a lot of trailers come out this week. This was a very trailer-packed week. There was a new trailer for the animated film Sing. There was a new Not Safe for Work trailer for the Transpotting sequel, Transpotting 2, or T2 Transpotting. Very nostalgic kind of trailer for all you Transpotting fans out there. There's a new trailer for La La Land, Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone film. There was a new trailer for Office Christmas Party with T.J. Miller, Jason Bateman, Jennifer Aniston, Olivia Munn, which we talked about earlier. So Kate McKinnon's also in there. There was a first trailer for the Chris Evans-led Gifted film, which is directed by Mark Webb, and Chris Miller plays essentially a single parent who's raising his niece, who happens to be like a math prodigy, and Frank wants to keep her, but his mother wants to take the child from him and put her in a program, and he wants her to live a normal life as much as possible. So that film comes out next year in April. It also has Jenny Slate and Octavia Spencer. It looks like a very very dramatic film. There some comedy moments in there as well, but the first trailer came out. Highly recommend you watch it. The first trailer for the sci-fi horror thriller Life, which is written by Zombieland and Deadpool writers Rent Reese and Paul Renrick, and is directed by Daniel Esposito, who directed the movie Safe House. The film revolves around 6 crew members of the International Space Station as they come into contact with their very first evidence of biological life on Mars, a small single-celled organism. As they begin their research of the specimen, however, this organism proves far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The film also stars Ryan Reynolds, of all people, Jake Gyllenhaal, Rebecca Ferguson, and a few other international actors as well. Life doesn't look that bad. It looks pretty interesting. It's set in space. Obviously, this International Space Station. The trailer doesn't really give too much away. There's a lot of it does definitely give off a very horror kind of thriller feel. It opens next month on May 26th, so right around Memorial Day weekend. So you can go check that out. A new trailer for the Lego Batman film came out, and it looks so funny. Everything about the Lego Batman, all the Lego Batman trailers that came out, this is the third one. All of them have been extremely just funny, and I cannot wait to see this. The Lego Batman movie it looks good. It looks good, and we finally get Zach Galifianakis voicing the Joker in the trailer. It's go watch it. It's awesome. A new trailer for the new Triple X movie, Triple X: The Return of Xander Cage, has come out. It looks so ridiculous. It looks so ridiculous, but at the same time, it's one of those movies where you're like, I'm not gonna go watch that, and it finally comes out, and you're like, yeah, I'll go watch it. It looks so ridiculous and so cheesy, but I know I'm still gonna go watch it. It just watch the trailer and you'll know how ridiculous this movie is. And finally, the big trailer came out this weekend. It's the second trailer for Wonder Woman. Came out. And there's a lot of new footage. There's a little bit more story. It just looks absolutely awesome. And I think hopefully Wonder Woman will be the first good DC Extended Universe movie that's actually good. I just can't wait to watch it. And I think I just can't wait to watch it. I really can't. I think the World War I setting is really perfect for a Wonder Woman film. I think it just makes the most sense. I cannot wait to watch it. The trailer is awesome. Again, the trailer is just awesome. So all the links to the trailers will be down below in the description / show notes area if you want to go watch it. Highly recommend. All right, so let's get to this week's releases. We have 3 big wide releases this week, and we have 1 limited release. The limited release is Loving, which is directed by Jeff Nichols, who directed films like Mud and Midnight Special. And the film is based on the true story of Richard and Mildred Loving, played by Joe Edgerton and Ruth Negga, a interracial couple who were sentenced to prison in Virginia in 1958 for getting married. The film also stars Will Doughton, Chris Allen, Martin Kos, Bill Camp, Nick Kroll, and Michael Shannon. The film looks extremely powerful. I've heard nothing but great things about it, and it's very timely as well. An interracial couple is very timely. It's just the trailer just looks so powerful, and the film has been getting some really good reviews as well. So and Joe Edgerton and Ruth Negga are 2 names that are very, very good. Joe Edgerton, of course, nothing short of solid in everything that he does, and Ruth Negga has been one of those people that have been surprising people, just making a name for herself. In AMC's Preacher, she was in something else recently where she was really good too. I just can't remember what it was besides Preacher. But yeah, the movie has been getting nothing but good reviews, hearing nothing but great things about it. It's very powerful. So been hearing nothing but great things. So if you have the chance to go watch it, I recommend you do. I know I'm gonna try to go watch it if I can. So that's the only limited release coming out this week, or only big limited release coming out this week. The wide release is coming out this week. One of them is Trolls. A troll princess and her companion, the one unhappy troll, tries to rescue her friends from being eaten by their nemesis. The voice cast includes a star-studded cast: Anna Kendrick, Justin Timberlake, Zoe Deschanel, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Russell Brand, Gwen Stefani, James Corden, Ron Funches, Jeffrey Tambor, and John Cleese. I'm not really looking forward to Trolls. I'm not. It's not even that I'm just... I watch animated films. It's not even that's not even targeted toward me. I don't know. It just doesn't look that good to me. I'm hearing some very surprising things, saying that it actually is really good, and the soundtrack and the score is good. But I don't know. I'm just not interested. I don't know. I'm just not interested. So the next wide release, is Hacksaw Ridge, of course, directed by Mel Gibson and based on the true story of World War II American Army medic Desmond T. Doss, played by Andrew Garfield, who served during the Battle of Okinawa, refused to kill people, and became the first American in history to be awarded the Medal of Honor, but also the first person to go into war without a gun, without firing a gun as well. So the film also stars Teresa Palmer, Vince Vaughn, Sam Worthington, Luke Bracey, Matt Nable, Rachel Griffiths, and Hugo Weaving. I've heard nothing but great things about this too. Say what you want about Mel Gibson, but he is one hell of a director, and this movie looks fantastic from the trailer itself. It looks good. I'm hearing nothing but great things about Andrew Garfield as well. There's apparently also early Oscar buzz for this film. Who knows if it actually will get nominated, but I've heard nothing but great things about it, so I can't wait to see how this movie does in the box office and how fans like it. So the last wide release this week is, of course, Marvel's Doctor Strange, directed by Scott Derrickson, a former neurosurgeon played by Benedict Cumberbatch, named Stephen Strange, embarks on a journey of healing only to be drawn into the world of the mystic arts. The film also stars Chiwetel Ejiofor, Rachel McAdams, Benedict Wong, Mads Mikkelsen, and Tilda Swinton. I saw the film last night, and it is truly unlike anything Marvel has ever done. It is one of those films that it surprised me. It is one of those films that surprised me. The visuals are fantastic. It's the visuals are unlike anything I've ever seen before. This movie really is, like some of the TV spots are saying, it's unlike anything you've ever seen before. It's unlike anything Marvel has ever done. It really is. And I think Scott Derrickson was a great choice to direct this film. You can clearly see his vision. You can clearly see that Scott Derrickson is one of those guys that was stuck to the horror genre for a while, and you can kind of see that a little bit in the film as well. And so he was a perfect choice for this. The cast is great. Benedict Cumberbatch is great as Stephen Strange. He totally pulls it off. Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One, despite all the controversy, whatever you whitewashing, whatever, she is fantastic in this. She almost and arguably steals the show as the Ancient One. She's just fantastic, and it's Tilda Swinton, so I mean, there's no denying she's not a great actress, and there's no denying that she was potentially going to steal the show, and she does. For argument's sake, she does. She is great as the Ancient One. Mads Mikkelsen is in there. He plays the villain. He's pretty great. I mean, he has one scene where it's like, okay, like he's the villain, but the best villains are always the ones that always have some ounce of truth. That you get, that they don't believe they're villains, and when they're talking to the hero or whoever, and they sound right, you're like, oh my god, is this person right? So he kind of has that scene in the film, and he's great in it. Benedict Wong, who plays the character Wong in the film, he's also a big highlight in the movie. Chiwetel Ejiofor as Baron Mordo, he's great in the film as well. Rachel McAdams, I wish they'd used her a little bit more. I can see why they would want a big name like Rachel McAdams in the film, which is fine. She doesn't do a lot in the film, so that's kind of one of the bad notes. Well, not the bad note, but one of the missteps in the casting. But yeah, the film is really unlike anything you've ever seen before. The visuals are fantastic. The action, surprisingly, there is a lot of hand-to-hand combat in this movie. For being a movie about magic and the mystic arts and interdimensional worlds and stuff like that, the hand-to-hand combat in this film is just awesome. So I was not expecting that at all. And there's a lot of action. But this movie starts off with a bit of a horror-esque scene, and then straight into an action set piece, which is great. So yeah, I mean, it's a great film. I mean, it's not Marvel's best film. I mean, there are familiar origin beat for beat moments. Iron Man is definitely a comparison you can make for the origin story, and even the character of Stephen Strange. He's kind of like this, egotistical not narcissistic, but he has a very big ego in the film, and you can kind of you can see him change as the film progresses and goes on. So Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job as Doctor Strange. He's one of those. He's a great actor. Obviously, he's a great actor, but he's a great Stephen Strange. They made a very good casting. And anytime with Tilda Swinton, you just get thrown in there and just invest so much, and you're just glued to the screen every time they're together. So there is, the movie does lag a little. It doesn't lag, but it does somewhat lose some steam in the final act of the film. I don't want to. This is a non-spoiler mini review, so I don't want to get too much into it. But it does lose some steam near the end a little bit. There are 2 post-credit scenes, so stay for the first credit scene and then stay for the very end. Everything about this movie, I really enjoyed everything. But the humor, it is a lot more humorous than I thought it was going to be. So the humor's there. Humor's top notch. The action's top notch. The visuals are essentially the best thing about this film. I will have a fully written review up on my WordPress accounts sometime this weekend, hopefully tomorrow or Sunday for sure. But it is a great film. I highly recommend you go watch it. If you're a Marvel fan, you'll enjoy it. It is a great film overall. Yes, there are some things that are just that don't really work too well. The third act loses some steam. There is some timing, not timing, but the film takes place over the course of several months. They could have worked that in a little bit better, honestly, but I really enjoyed it. I really did. If I have to give it a rating, I give it a 4 out of 5. It's a really good movie. I'm leaning a little bit toward 4.5 out of 5 because I had a lot of fun watching it. But 4.5 out of 5 in that range for sure. I'll give it an official rating when I write my review. But yeah, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend you go watch it. I do recommend you watch it in 3D. I know it's a pain in the ass. I know the 3D, not a lot of people like 3D, but I think with the 3D, you get a lot more of the depth and the layer of the special effects. I'm going to try to watch it again in 2D. I'm going to watch it again, but I'm going to watch it in 2D. But I want to see how that kind of works out. But I saw it in 3D. I saw it in IMAX 3D of all things. But I think the 3D does really help, and I think it does help with the depth of what they were trying to accomplish. So if you could, and if you can stand, the movie's not that long. So if you can stand it, go with the 3D. Go with the 3D prices. You won't regret it too much. All right, so let's get to this week's box office predictions. My picks last week were Inferno at number 1, Boo Madea Halloween at number 2, Jack Reacher Never Go Back at number 3, Ouija, or Ouija, however you want to pronounce it, Origin of Evil at number 4, and The Accountant at number 5. The actual box office last week, some films just got reversed. Boo Madea Halloween surprised everyone with a second box office win. Inferno came in at number 2, Jack Reacher Never Go Back came in at number 3, The Accountant at number 4, and Ouija, or Ouija, or again, however you want to pronounce it, Origin of Evil came in at number 5. So my picks this week, Doctor Strange will be number 1 for sure at the box office, although it will be some stiff competition with Trolls, which is an animated film, which is a kids movie, and if parents don't want to take their kids to go see Doctor Strange, they're going to go watch Trolls. So yeah, it's going to be some stiff competition this weekend, but I do think that Doctor Strange will pull out the win at number 1. Trolls will be number 2, very close at number 2. Hacksaw Ridge will be number 3. Boo and Madea Halloween will probably be number 4, and Inferno will round out the top 5 at number 5 for this weekend's box office. So again, Doctor Strange number 1, Trolls number 2, Hacksaw Ridge number 3, Boo and Madea Halloween number 4, and Inferno at number 5. Those are my box office picks. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's podcast. You guys are the real MVP if you stuck all the way through. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's podcast. Again, hopefully it's a bit of an early one. I do want to put this out a little bit earlier than I have been in the last couple weeks. But you guys are great. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Let me know what your favorite news item of the week was, what surprised you the most, and if you saw Doctor Strange, what did you think of the movie, and what would you rate it in the end? What would you rate it? And if you want to join the box office prediction game, let me know as well. Let me know your box office predictions down below in the comments section. So yeah, all right. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Obviously, if anything drops after the podcast goes up, you can go like my Facebook page at facebook.com/moviepit. That's facebook.com/moviepit. A link will be down below. Also, while you're down there, you can also click the link for my WordPress account, which is where I do all my written reviews, mini reviews of multiple films, and this month's, and every month, not just this month, but every month, I release at the beginning of the month the movies that are coming out to give you guys a little bit of a preview on that. And I will be doing a lot more with my WordPress account soon as well. So you want to go like my WordPress account, you can go to movieswithchris.wordpress.com. That is movieswithchris.wordpress.com. Again, link will be down below right there next to the Facebook page as well. So thank you guys so much for listening to this week's podcast. I look forward to maybe reading some of your comments. If not, I look forward to doing another podcast next week for you guys. And yeah. So thank you guys so much. Have a safe and have a safe, good weekend. I don't know. I tried to add something else new, but I couldn't think of anything. So have a safe, happy. Have a safe and happy. Have a safe, happy, and good weekend. And as always, go watch some movies.